Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Vinny Maurici. He is the Vice President of Data Engineering at Object Edge, and we kind of get into some topics around data, but we pull back many times to say, what is the business solution here rather than what is the computer science data selection or the IT solution here. It's really what is the relationship of data to the business and to the business objectives and to the growth of the business, the efficiency of the business. And I think it was amazing. Vinny's got this really diversified background that he can talk about distribution because he was in distribution and saw how data can be extremely messy, but how it can be cleaned and organized in a fashion that we start moving forward with business objectives. And again, it was just kind of fascinating conversation. I love catching up with people who maybe cut their teeth in similar areas that I did, and looking at how do we be better, servants to distribution clients or to people who are trying to change their organizations for the better. And I think, again, this was something that, I wasn't quite sure always, where these conversations are going to go, but it was really impressive how he's down to earth, easy to talk to about a very complex subject. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. This episode was brought to you by my friends at Profit2. A couple of years ago, I was introduced to Profit2 through a client who had been working with them for over a year. This client had been struggling with improving gross margins and was looking for a service to help them recapture some of their lost opportunities. Through their work with Profit2, it took about a year, but they were able to bump their gross margins by almost 2 points. For this distributor, and frankly for anyone in the business, this margin enhancement was a big deal. Beyond the pricing service, Profit2 has started helping clients look at cost and rebate management. If you want to discover hidden margin opportunities, come take a look at what Profit2 can do for you. Learn more at www.distributiontalk.com/profit2. That's profit with a number 2. Well, hey, Vinny, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thanks for taking the time to be with me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I've been kind of perusing. You and I talked a little bit, but I've been perusing, through what you do and kind of have a diversified background around, data and all things. But if you wouldn't mind, give us a little history lesson about your familiarity with distribution and really how you got into this whole data analytics or data study thing.
Yeah, it's funny because I run a data business unit. I've been in data consulting for 15 years, and a lot of folks will say like, oh, you must have gone to college and studied data engineering and got into all of this through some sort of academic setting where I learned data best practices and all of those pieces. And really what I actually feel like is unique about me, and that can occur, right? Like learning about data at that academic level starting in university is fantastic. But for me, I graduated in 2008, right in the middle of the Great Recession.
Yeah, you're about to, it's the downhill slide right there.
Exactly. Yeah. And I graduated with a degree in business administration. So at that point, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go send out resumes and see what I can do. And what I ended up getting a job in was industrial distribution, actually the largest wire and cable and fasteners distributor in North America. They were actually purchased recently by Wesco, but that ended up being this blessing in disguise. I was in inventory management. I was a planner. Yeah. I was doing buying and understanding and really recognizing all of these issues within that whole supply chain world. And I've always had an analytical mind, and I was a buyer for 2 years, and what was nice about starting in industry for me, and it was a Fortune 500 organization, is I had the ability to then move vertically. So I started as a buyer, and then I got into forecast analytics, right? Because we still had that model where, hey, we're doing just in time for all of our customers. In that world, it was fasteners. So you have literal assembly lines building semi-trucks that I was working on. And I'm flying fasteners out from Canada down to Mexico because we're running short on them. And I got into the forecast side of things. And then from there, again, a bit of a move internally at that organization. They wanted to go through a governance and cleansing exercise for their data, and I jumped at it. It was, again, an opportunistic moment. So here I am 3-4 years into my first job out of university as a planner in supply chain for one of the largest distributors of wire and cable and fasteners in the country. And I'm moving my way into kind of the data world. And then I really cut my teeth on, it was an Oracle software. It's called EDQP. They actually ended up sunsetting it, but it was
yeah, I was going to say,
where,
I'm not familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a way, and this is all the way back in 2010, a way to automate data modeling and design of constructs like classification and attribution and metadata. So there's all these components that I was never exposed to previously that I really created a foundational sense of knowledge. So if you can like step through this whole process of, I became an inventory planner, really entry level, right? But I really got into the nitty gritty of how that side works. I got into forecast analytics, where it was quite literally Microsoft Access was my baby, and building out every reporting known to man, and then moved into more of these technical tool sets that built some of these best practices that I know. And the rest from there is a bit of history. I was poached into consulting. I became a principal consultant where I guided other organizations through this process of data design. And some of the things I hope to talk to you about is like, we don't do data for the sake of data. I think that's a problem that I actually see in the consulting world right now, in trying to help these large distributors figure out their life. You see commercials with Matthew McConaughey doing the Salesforce thing, calling data is gold, right? Which is, to be fair, it's true. It's on everybody's mind, but we're not really saying anything. We're not talking about why it's important. We're not talking about the benefit that you're going to get out of it. So for me, I saw the pain. I saw all of these issues taking shape, and then I was able to then build my knowledge off of that. And so that's how I got into data. Nothing too fancy, but I built my expertise from there, and it's been a wonderful journey since then.
You know, it's interesting, going back to, you not being in that world in your, university studies. I think it endears you to my audience, to be honest with you, because most of us are not in the field that we actually studied in college. That was just something, most of us, that is something you fall into, and you realize, I think, as you were in that inventory planner role, you saw things that I don't even know if they could have explained to you in university. I mean, I really don't. Some of these challenge. Yeah.
I mean, even if you do, take away data for a second, even if you were to study supply chain, right, you wouldn't know the nitty gritty detail around what's really involved. And for me, I had mentioned I was in fasteners, right? And I'm working with all these guys who have been there, some of them decades, like 40 years. They're teaching me about all these different fasteners and electrocoating and like Foss and oil and the different ways that we can manufacture these fasteners for the assembly line. I'm learning about all the compliance process. Nobody's ever like a little kid saying like, yeah, I want to be a fastener genius, or I want to really understand how to supply these assembly lines to build vehicles. Like, that is something that you can only learn on the job, and then especially at the scale that we were working at, because there's a difference between, hey, I'm a boutique distributor managing, my select list of customers that I support, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. But then there's just a whole nother level of complexity, especially from a systems, and I was mentioning just in time, trying to get all of that to all of your customers when they need it, to the quality that they have. Like I mentioned, there was a lot of compliance aspects that we had to work through as well. So it gets really, really complex, and that's not something that you can just learn through academics.
I totally agree. I mean, I grew up in the contractor supply business, but a heavy emphasis on fasteners, on construction fasteners and things like that. And there was lot traceability and things like that again, nobody's going to tell you about. Nobody's going to say, figure that out. And I too kind of cut my teeth on the inventory management side. And, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And, you can be the rock star one day, and you can really screw it up another day.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I remember a gentleman used to say, he said to me years ago, he said that it's part science, but there's a whole lot of art to it as well. And I think that's the things that you just could not have been exposed to in an academic setting. So
100%. Yeah.
Nothing against the academic setting, of course, because I have good friends in academia.
It builds a baseline, but
yeah,
especially when you get into distribution, and in my case, supporting a lot of these assembly lines, you're doing, and this is where I think it's part of what I've been doing to help organizations, is there's a lot of mental math and like a lot of data massaging happening so that you can support everyone. Because you extend out like all of these different areas that I need to procure to make sure my distribution centers have everything when I'm buying from all of my local mom and pop manufacturers here in the States. And then those 16-week lead time, 1 million SKU order minimum from China that need to come through and get through customs. And there's an amalgamation of all of these different complexities of making sure I'm simply stocked properly. Like as simple as that to then support these customers.
Well, and absolutely. I think, you just pointed out that the varying suppliers that you have out there, where you do have that really large MOQ from, China or, long lead time, whatnot, but and you got to think in terms of container loads, and whereas you then also have your suppliers that are domestic or, very local, and the methodology is different. So you definitely have to be on the, work on the fly. I mean, you've really got to think about how am I going to manage this and how am I going to somehow fit this into a daily schedule so that you can actually keep those, the shelves stocked in the simplest of, applications.
And then the math is changing on top of that. Like even once COVID hit and all of the supply chain costs all of a sudden like flew through the roof.
Yes.
Back in 2008, when I started as an inventory manager, everything was shifting towards overseas, right? It's like, fine, I'll take the hit. I'll do the high quantity of purchases because the raw cost is just so cheap and I'm going to just ship it over in containers.
Right.
Now, with the combination of automation and the skyrocketing prices of, even shipping
containers and things
containers
like that.
over here, there's math on maybe we do move it back to the States, which I think is great, but there's so many aspects to it that you need to ensure your margins are at the exact levels where you need them to be, because so many distributors, as I'm sure your audience knows, like it's always so tight, and that has to be something of constant importance for them.
Absolutely. And I think, again, the more sophisticated ones and the ones that just don't want to get pinched so bad, they actually recognize where they can make money and not always, blanket that margin across the board. So, and again, the only way you understand that is you understand your data. You actually start respecting it instead of saying, oh, that's just not right. It's like, well, it is right because nobody's massaged it. Nobody's played with this. This is actual factual data, logical data that's coming out. Choose to ignore it. Fine. It's up to you.
You hit it right on the head. I mean, when we start intersecting this with data, which is my expertise and what I help organizations with, it's about saying, hey, let's even think about how within most organizations, including large distributors, you've got usually like a business intelligence and analytics or reporting group of folks that sit within the business. And a lot of the times they're using any sort of software, any sort of analytics software to essentially massage data to make it look as right as possible. I mean, the way that I like to describe it is the legacy construct of reporting tools wasn't about the best and easiest way to create, for example, predictive analytics or to make my organization as efficient as possible. The goal of that software was to be as flexible as possible to manipulate the data that I have, with the acknowledgement that the data that I have is extremely disorganized, extremely ugly, coming in from all of these different data sources with a lot of different redundancies. So what they're built to do and what the skill set within your organization in the reporting side is to really just make heads and tails of what's there. And so what we want to do in a modern setting is flip that on its head. What we want to do is get the house in order so that my entire focus of insights within the business isn't about how much I can massage this data to make heads and tails. It should be accurate and consistent from the get-go as it moves its way into any of my reporting or data warehousing tools. Now it's about how can I make my business better by leveraging this data, which it sounds odd because it's like, of course, we're always trying to use reporting to make our business better. But really, something as simple as what were my sales last quarter for a specific category of goods that applies to this specific subsection of customers I have is an extremely hard thing to do at most organizations right now.
Absolutely, Vinny. And it's so funny you said that because I literally had this conversation yesterday with a client and their reporting tools are subpar. I'm just going to say what it is. And it's frustrating because we all know what we want to get to. We want to, say again, what were my sales in this particular product category to this customer category? And you would think that's a relatively easy ask.
Yeah.
But first of all, if the backend database has not been prepared for that and the tool you're using to try to extract that and put it into a logical format, it's not very good. Man, it's just, these are frustrating conversations. And, from a consulting standpoint, you're like, I just need certain information so I can help you. I just can't help you until we know a little bit more.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit it right on the head. When I look at my background, right? Data is this behemoth of a topic, first off, right?
Sure.
I don't even like saying I'm in data because it almost sounds like snake oil because data is everything. I type a single letter on the keyboard. That's a piece of data that goes somewhere.
Sure.
So what we want to do is start grouping different either data elements or themes within an organization that we can start hitting on. So for me, I actually always love to start with master data and master data design, which is distinctly different than when we get into data and analytics, which is the insights that I'm driving. So master data is quite simply, what are the data constructs and truths of things within my organizations? I buy and sell finished good products. So I want to master product information, or I buy from my vendors. I want to master vendor information. I sell to my customers. I want to master customer information. Each one of those themes, vendor, customer, product, also location is another theme, are areas then we can dive into, build a specific construct, for example, on products that's designed to be as accurate and intuitive and as operationally efficient as possible. And then that can then flow through the business where I can do anything I want on it. So for example, products. Everybody's got an ERP, right? I need to do planning. I need to have the acquisition of my products and things like that. And you've got the big boys out there like Oracle and SAP, and they've got their materials and item master that they define. But it's defined from a very specific point of view. It's picking and shipping. It's supply chain. How can I best pick and ship products and send them to my customers, which works really great if it was the 80s and 90s still. But if we look at the modern era of procurement where people actually want an experience of purchasing products, even in the B2B world, right? I was a planner, for example, at age 22 out of college. I didn't know like any detail around fasteners, right? But they plopped me into that role and they said, hey, you're going to go buy these critical items for our critical customers. And so a person like me, and there's a difference between a person like me in 2008 and a person like me in the Gen Z era in 2024, who is going to come in and needs and has an expectation of a good buying and procurement experience.
Right. Absolutely.
And that is not the old school way of, hey, I'm going to go pick up the phone, call my local sales rep. They're going to explain me through everything, and then I'm going to make a buying decision. Nobody likes to pick up the phone anymore. So if I have a good foundation of data, now I've solved one, that analytics component that we just talked about, but also two, I now even have the ability to build out that experience. Before, I wouldn't even have that ability to create that experience. So there's a bit of a chicken and the egg. Some people are always afraid to build out this nice experience type of level of design because they don't even have the construct of data to initiate that type of creation of experience.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct that whether you're talking about customer experience or the procurement experience, I guess it would be a good way to put it, or the purchasing experience. Yeah, your next generation coming in is expecting a certain level of experience. And I think your point about not picking up the phone is absolutely appropriate. People will spend, 20 minutes researching something that perhaps they could have called someone and been done with in 5 minutes, but their nature is to research, is to go out and search for, and there's, they go through their internet connection. That is their life. Yep. They're going out and they're going to get that. And if either it could be a manufacturer, could be the distributor or anywhere on the supply chain, if we're not building that experience, then they're going to go elsewhere. They're going to look away from that organization.
Exactly. And look, I love to play devil's advocate for myself sometimes, right?
Yeah.
There's always the cynic's point of view, especially in B2B, that is, well, why in the world would I create a B2C type of digital experience in my B2B world? My customers, they're all either engineers or maybe they just do recurring purchases.
Transactions,
so
sure.
You have that argument. And then what I like to come back with is that, and I have evidence of this, anecdotal evidence from customers that I've worked with, which is when you do create that experience, all of a sudden you get to open up the door to whether it's upselling or cross-selling products, or even as simple as expanding your assortment. I worked with an organization, one of the world's largest paint and coatings company. Aside from paint and coatings, they also sell like the sundries, like the paintbrushes and the tape and everything that goes along with it. So if you're a big boy distributor like a Uline or Grainger or whomever, you might have all of those contracts bottled up. And so you wouldn't necessarily have that as part of your contracted experience with a paint and coatings manufacturer. But if I create, and in this case, it was designing punch out. So those of you out there who know how like the punch out world works in B2B procurement, you're going in and you might be using like SAP Ariba or Yardi or Ops Technology. These are some of the major punch out providers out there. And you pop out a digital experience that looks like a retail page, but it's more for a B2B buying side. It's going to have your contracted prices. It might tell you like your minimum order quantities and things like that. But then on top of that, you could still list out everything that you have to offer for them at either a list price or some across the board discount that you're willing to do for that customer. And so when you do that, you've now opened the eyes of whoever's making that procurement of saying, hey, maybe I don't need to go and look at these other vendors. I can use this as my one-stop shop, where they didn't really know or recognize that that was an option before. So there's all this opportunity cost of revenue generation at many of these distributors because they might not even be in a situation where they can display their wealth of goods. Because again, if my assumption is I just have my customers, they're reordering the same thing every month, and I've got a really good sales guy at the other end of the phone, and that salesperson might be very, very good, but still isn't going to have the knowledge of the entire assortment set that you're able to sell. So it just opens up more doors. It allows for less opportunity cost of not even giving your end customer an option to purchase more than what they currently have.
Vinny, and I think you just hit on something that I look at in the absence of being able to offer that through, let's say, a portal or some personalized experience to that customer. You are relying on this fallible salesperson, on the other end of the phone, and they may be an expert in whatever, and they may know the products that you sell and whatnot. But on any given day, depending on, the level of pressure, the number of, phones that are ringing or whatnot, are they going to be able to access all of the things that they know about a complementary item or all the things? No, they're again, only human. And they're going to have those human stressors that are going to prevent them from doing what, let's face it, your customer portal can do without stress every single day, twice on Sunday.
Yep. And I love, and by the way, because this is an area and a topic that we always end up discussing when we start building out these business cases for building a digital experience, which is, okay, how's this supposed to work in conjunction with my physical sales force? Does it replace them? And it's not funny, but it's one of those things you think about because, of course, it's not replacing those people on the ground. In fact, you should be viewing this enhancing them because most sales folks, your top salespeople within an organization, they're usually really, really good at some sort of niche. Maybe it's an industry vertical niche of customers that they work on, or maybe it's a product type that they're really, really smart and conversive about, and they know every ups and downs sideways fact about an indexable cutting tool, for example. But there's all of these other areas, again, that they're probably missing out. And from a compensation level and from a commissions level, if they had more product data or if they had more of these things at their fingertips, they could probably be upselling even more. So when we talk about experience, it can be for the end user, the actual customer making a purchase, like an actual physical add to cart, but it can also be meant for, we built what was called a sales searchable database. And the sales team has more information at their fingertips to then build and expand on their current sales that they're giving to their customers. So there's so many ways that we can look at how something like what we're focusing on right now, product data, can affect a company in a positive level. And it doesn't always need to be as one-dimensional as, hey, I'm going to go build a website or a digital storefront. Like, you don't have to do that. There's so many other ways that you can enable sales within the organization on top of doing those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you're right. We think of it in terms of add-on at the cart level. And I'm glad you said that because I think that's really what we all envision when we're talking about this. But then again, how do you augment, the process of that? I'm looking at salespeople as the relationship builder, the door kicker, the closer, open doors, but the face of the organization and not necessarily the add-on sales especially if you're a territory sales rep. I mean, you're out, doing territory sales. I think this could be an augment.
And they shouldn't have to be an encyclopedia, right? They shouldn't have to be the encyclopedia of every single thing that you as a distributor have to offer. Like, they have other skill sets that make them really valuable on the ground.
I think, one of the most valuable things a field salesperson could do is get somebody addicted to their own customer portal, that customer portal.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's one of the best things they could do. I mean, if now, I would hope that the compensation still stays, that they're still getting commission for those sales, and they should, because if they got them addicted, they should. But boy, that would just open them up, free them up to think in terms of different product categories and different solutions that customer could be buying. And then you slowly migrate, start building that customer experience. Say, oh, I didn't know you had that. Well, let's get that into your portal or to your experience so that, we can just really capture a bigger wallet share ultimately.
Exactly. And look, at the end of the day, it's not that hard of a business case to describe to an organization why something like really good product data is important. Where you hit the wall are topics that we're just talking about right now, which is, at the end of the day, internal politics that can sometimes stumble things that would be best for the business. And for me, when I go into those types of situations, we need to make sure that we're empathizing. We don't want to say like, yeah, this is going to replace your sales team, because that's not true. Like, you can't do that. You still need that relationship factor, especially in the B2B world when there's large consequences at stake. I like to compare B2C retail has a lot of volume, but low volume per person, right? Like, every user, like, I might go out and I'll buy, a $1,000 TV and I'll give Best Buy that revenue in that moment, right? But that's it. And then you've got a million other
But I'm
people
not going to do it tomorrow, the next day after
exactly.
that.
Exactly. So in the B2B world, you need salespeople because you're convincing your end customer to buy a lot from you, to buy it over and over from you, to buy it at a good price with all the great customer service that you're going to be selling them on. And the experience factor is just another element that makes you differentiated, right? You can't ignore customer service. You can't ignore the pricing components of all of this, but that experience is something that was never a focus point, probably until the last decade or so. But now we have to be catching up. That's a core area of differentiation for you as a distributor to your end customer.
Something you and I had talked about previously was you can sell an entity on, I'm going to increase your revenue. Great. And people can get on board with that. They get excited about that and whatnot. But, one of the things you mentioned to me is really taking the construct of data that you work on and moving it more towards providing efficiencies internally, such as, operational or purchasing or something like that. Could you talk about maybe something that you all have done that really is along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you bring this up, because I think sometimes we focus so much on do this because you will gain more revenue, focus on data because of revenue. And that's very true, but even more so, and I think this hits distributors or any industry where internal margins are tight. You don't have the luxury of hiring an army of folks to do certain aspects. And in fact, we mentioned how sometimes that like whole replacement model of the sales team, which is a misnomer, can sometimes put a hamper on some of these initiatives. Same thing can happen with just the concept or idea of providing a good experience. I had mentioned before, think about the legacy of product information that I'm capturing for a distributor maybe in the 80s, 90s, and even now still. It's basic supply chain data. It's global pieces of information. What am I buying? At what cost? I put a short description on there. And that's ultimately it. That's enough to create a PO to my vendor and to create a sales order to my customer. And that's all I need. But to create a customer experience, I need a lot more pieces of information, and I need a lot more components at a category specific level, right? Buying a power drill is very different than buying a TV. That's very different than buying a drill bit, right? So all of those now add up to the snowball effect where folks get worried. They're like, I'm not Amazon. I can't go hire 2,000 people to go curate all of this information in-house and to manage it. And then when they do make the initiative, they do realize that it is kind of creating this thing, this behemoth of information that I need to manage. But what I will say is, by doing that, you're forcing yourself to now invest in proper technology and proper ways to manage that data. It's going to force you out of your spreadsheets, and it's going to get you into, let's say, a PIM tool or a product information management tool or a master data management tool, where we leverage workflow within the organization. Like, we don't have, John Doe with his spreadsheet. If he gets hit by a bus, we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow on how to process these components of information. So when you dive in and you make that initiative to say, hey, I'm going to create a good data construct, a governed data construct within my organization, and I'm going to invest in the technology to do that properly, all of a sudden, I can now leverage all of those governance ability. And when I say governance ability, because again, sometimes I'll say words and then I understand if you're a listener, you're just thinking like, okay, this is just another buzzword that people talk about, enterprise data governance and things like that. But for me, it comes down to, okay, how is a product getting onboarded and enriched and sellable within the business? Right now, it's done through, I throw some stuff on an ERP, I put a digital assets in a shared drive, I put stuff in an Excel file, I maybe amalgamate stuff in Microsoft Access, and I get it going. That's a very inefficient and non-scalable process. Whereas if we implement something like a master data management solution, I now have one simplified workflow where I say, hey, this product is brand new from this vendor. It kicks off, let's say, 3 simultaneous workflows, one from a product manager, one from my marketing manager, and one person to review or maybe in compliance or something like that. So things are now moving all at once, and they're moving very quickly. So I'm able to both scale and create efficiency within my organization. And a lot of this is low-hanging fruit. It's one of those types of conversations where we'll walk into a business, and the first thing we do is like discovery and strategy sessions, and we simply say, walk us through the onboarding and enrichment and sellable process of a finished good, of a new finished good that you're about to sell.
Yeah.
And it starts coming out of their mouths. They're like, oh boy, I guess, yeah, that is how we do it. It's very low tech. I mean, and we're at Fortune 250 organizations. So it's like we tell people, don't be nervous about saying this, because I've been to very, very large organizations and they're still working in spreadsheets and they're still working in extremely inefficient SOPs, and that's okay. It's like, first thing is recognizing the issue, then we'll solve for that issue.
Right. Acceptance. And then, all right, then we can go forward. I mean, I just, the thought there, really thinking about generating workflows for that birth to grave of, of a product. And I think that's really fascinating. And that sounds like something that, it makes a lot of sense talking about it. And, then when it comes to implementation, there it gets a little sticky.
Yeah.
Because you just have decades and decades of, we've been doing it this way to unravel. And really, you're starting to dive into the change management realm where people have to say, oh, okay, well, I'm a little scared, but let's maybe try this a little different, another way.
And that is difficult. The change management piece is an area where you have to constantly put that at the forefront of doing any of these initiatives. And that starts with executive level buy-in. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
It would be, it would be a lie for me to say over my 15 years, every single program or project or initiative went perfectly, right? There have been the ones that have just like fallen down the spiral. And without a doubt, the theme of why they have either failed or there was a false start or we never ended up getting it off the ground was because there was a lack of executive level buy-in. Because what that can do is, the very first thing it does is it pushes politics to the side, because politics shows at the forefront. At the mid-level, the lower level, people get defensive about what they're doing. I just talked about John Doe running a spreadsheet on his own computer. Does this mean that I'm going to be out of a job? Which, again, you're looking at this thing like, absolutely not. We actually just want to make your life easier and make it more effective. But you have to, I used the word empathize before. You have to empathize with these people and say, I understand why you doing the same thing for 10 years. Now somebody's coming in and saying, hey, there's a better way of doing this because the business wants to scale or the business wants to do better. That's something that you need to bring to the forefront. Don't wait until you're midway through some sort of data initiative to all of a sudden lay it at the feet of these people that are going to be at the forefront of some of these changes. Bring them into the process, bring them into the know of what we're doing. A lot of the times we get asked like, hey, are these IT initiatives? Are they business initiatives? And the answer is all of the above. That's the thing about data, right? Data affects everything. It's in IT because of course there's systems and technology that we have to work with and new systems and technologies that we'll be implementing. But at the end of the day, this is for the business and this is driven by the business and the operations of driving that business. And if they're not involved in day one on what we're doing, why we're doing it, what it's going to look like, how it's going to affect their job, you're destined to fail. You just are. And you just have to be transparent with those folks.
Vinny, it just kind of dawned on me. I mean, I think part of coming in and really helping people get comfortable with what you're talking about, I think your background is a tremendous asset to you, that you can go in and they can really, you can relate. You can say, I get it. I was a 22-year-old in this seat.
Yeah.
And this is where, and the reason I bring this up, it works for me tremendously. I talk about being, not somebody from academia, but somebody from, I did these jobs, all these jobs you do today, I have done these jobs. And so I can relate very quickly and I become more trustable at this. And I think that is a tremendous advantage for you, saying, hey, look, here's what I saw, I sat in and I did. And this is why I suggest, hey, let's make our lives a little easier.
Yeah. I unfortunately think modern consulting has fallen into the trap where they're no longer true consultants anymore. They're folks that are like cheap time and materials requirements gatherers that just do what they're told, and that has this veil of consulting. And it goes back to what I said, I think at the very beginning of the conversation, data for the sake of data means nothing.
Right.
And I pride myself in the fact that It was in the middle of the recession when I graduated, and it was just a numbers game of sending out my resume. And I just happened to get this job as a buyer, as an inventory planner, and worked my way through that role for 5 years. And it wasn't the best job in the world. They treated me really well, but it was just, it was that entry-level job. But I gained so much experience from that. And I grew in a way that changed my mentality of saying like, hey, I'm not just going to go in and ask, what do you want to do? I'll just do that for you. It's what has worked, what hasn't worked, what's the biggest ROI, why am I doing this, what are the things that are going to affect change for the positive within your organization, and how I've seen them in my past. That's true consulting. True consulting is guiding on what folks should be doing, give some best practice overlays to any initiative that is going on. And I feel like it's almost like a dying type of world that I've got. Maybe I'm just living in this cliched consulting life. But you've got people saying the same thing about like career politicians, right? You have career consultants. And I think there are problems that occur when you are a career politician. Same thing with consultants. You've never actually been in industry. So I'm very prideful of the fact that I've been in industry because it gives me that perspective. I can talk in the same ways and terminology and vernacular that of the people I'm working with.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate it. And I've built my practice in the exact same way that I'm a believer in that value. And I've seen people that appreciate that value. And I have seen the other side. I've seen, I remember again with my family business, I saw people that came into our company and it was boilerplate. It was just like, man, okay, you're going through the motions. I get it. You took the other client's name off, put my name on. I saw that and there's no value there. But while we're talking about serving customers, tell me how folks can find you. How can they work with you? And what's the best way to engage you and at least start a conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. So again, my name is Vinny Maurici. I'm head of the data business unit at a company called Object Edge. Object Edge, we've actually been around since the 90s, if you can believe that. And I had the data side. We also support commerce and CPQ, really any of the revenue management solutions out there for organizations based in Walnut Creek, California. I personally live in Chicago. I'm a Midwesterner, a lifelong Midwesterner myself.
Sure.
But you can find me either by searching Object Edge or finding me on LinkedIn, Vincent Maurici, Vinny Maurici. I kind of have all of the names. You
kind of have them all on there.
They'll point back directly to me. So
sure.
I love just having conversations too. I'm one of those guys that happy to jump on a call and just talk, like what's going on, what's your pain. Compliance is another piece that everybody's talking about these days as well that we've been talking about. Data just has this long tail of so many different areas. And again, it's all about finding that theme and then solving for that theme.
Perfect. Well, hey, Vinny, I really appreciate it. I'll make sure that, we have all of your information in the show notes. And it's absolutely been a pleasure, man. I've really enjoyed, getting your perspective and chatting a little bit about this, a lot of the things that I deal with on a regular basis. So again, thanks for taking the time to be on here.
Thank you for having me, Jason. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distribution-talk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Impostor Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.